Other than logo splash screens, menus are the first thing you interact with when you boot up a new video game, and they've changed a lot over the years, especially on consoles. On PC, the freedom of design is a lot broader as the input is through a mouse, which is more free-flowing, whereas on console the D-pad is usually the main form of navigation, meaning items in the menu must go in a logical order and work in a specific way as to make sense for the player. And it's always a plus when you get to the end of the menu list, you can press down one more to return back to the top. Little things like this create a seamless experience instead of getting in the way of the player before they're even playing the game itself. One series with a long history and evolution is Call of Duty, and their menu designs have changed drastically since the series' inception in 2003. The games have come a long way in 20 years, but is the same true for the menu designs that present them? Let's delve into the progression of the menus in every mainline Call of Duty game, compare and contrast them, and see where they ended up. The original Call of Duty released on October 29, 2003 for Windows and was developed by Infinity Ward. It used a new AI ally system to do something different than the traditional lone wolf style first-person shooters at the time. Off the bat, its menu is simple. It's a list-style menu with exclusively vertical navigation. As with most video games, the current active selection is highlighted and animated, and moving to a new option produces a feedback sound effect. This menu is unobtrusive and largely static besides the text animation. Like most PC games, the options are plentiful, and the menus within the options behave the same way as the main menu. The serif font fits with the more formal nature of the game's tone and subject, and text is perfectly readable. Color palette-wise, it's got the muted war browns with mustard yellow for highlighting, but nothing wrong with something that works. I will always appreciate a restrained interaction system, rather than one that feels the need to fight for your attention span with crazy colors or animations that aren't appropriate for the style of the game or just plain out obnoxious. Call of Duty 2 was also developed by Infinity Ward and released on October 25, 2005 for PC, along with it being an Xbox 360 launch game. They aimed to create a more open, lowercase b Battlefield experience with new features and graphical upgrades to their now proprietary IW engine. Menu-wise, not much had changed in the 2 years, largely the same vertical navigating list format with a static image as the backdrop. It's still aesthetically pleasing and clean, with a nice gradient behind the menu to make it pop. A small but important thing to me about a menu experience is wraparound. When you aren't using a mouse and get to the bottom of a list, instead of having to press up however many times to get back all the way to the top, you can press down once more and it will bring you back to the start. It's something that surprisingly gets overlooked but makes the experience faster and more streamlined. Even in the option menus, there's a slick black gradient behind it to improve readability. Fonts seem largely the same and still work for the game's genre. The pause menu continues the same style and system as the main menu, which works because of its simplicity. Overall, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, and that's appropriate here. Call of Duty 3 released on November 3, 2006 for PS2, Xbox, and Xbox 360, later coming to PS3 and Wii. Is the only entry not released for PC. Developed by Treyarch, it was their second entry after Call of Duty 2 Big Red One, and it was the first entry to allow the player to throw grenades back at the enemy who threw them at you. The title screen is simple as before, but in a slightly different layout. The press start text blinks, and you must create a profile in a similar typewriter-style menu. When we get to the main menu, the most notable changes are the fonts not being serif any longer and text being centered now. The options menu is also under profiles, which is a bit strange. All the menus wrap around, which is great to see. Text organization is really nice. The menus are logical, they make sense, they aren't overly flashy. Maintains a nice aesthetic and color palette. Button prompts are simple and always on screen. Overall, it's a nice small evolution of the previous with some nice aesthetic changes, but maintains the simplicity, responsiveness, and style of the Call of Duty brand. Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, the Infinity Ward developed New Beginning, released November 5, 2007 for PC, Xbox 360, and PS3. Later being ported to Wii as Reflex Edition. This is the first in the series to deviate from the World War II era stories and place the action in the, at the time, future year of 2011. It was also the first COD to introduce multiplayer kill streaks, along with the entire arsenal of modern equipment and weaponry. Not only was this a big step for the series in terms of gameplay and story, the menus also had a pretty big reworking. It is the first menu screen to feature motion graphics instead of just a static image as the background. Animated smoke billows across the screen, adding just the right amount of movement to spice it up, but not be distracting. The menu interface is minimalist and modern, and also scores a point from me for wrapping around like the previous. Highlighted text almost glistens to indicate the currently selected option. Response time between navigation and selections is literally instant still. It's snappy, feels good, and you aren't wasting a single millisecond. Even if you make a mistake and have to go back, you're back as fast as you move forward. In-game, the class selection utilizes the screen space very wisely. It doesn't have any extraneous information, it tells you everything you're getting, your stats, and even briefly explains what the perks will do to your character. The series' menus still maintain simplicity over everything, making it clear and logical to navigate and understand. I may have some rose-tinted glasses for this era of Call of Duty, but I really think this and the next few games were peak design for menus in the entire series. Call of Duty World at War, Army crawls back into the World War II setting. It was released on November 11, 2008 for PS3, Xbox 360, and Wii. It technically was the beginning of the Black Ops story arc, and the game is the first to feature the highly lauded Zombies game mode. Similar to COD 4, the main menu features some light animated smoke, but adds some lightning and the gloomy clouds in the background. Menu layout is similar, aligned left once again, but the action button prompt to proceed now follows the cursor, jumping to each option as it's highlighted, and then the back button being displayed at the bottom within the sub-menus. Similar to the first couple games, the highlighted text animation glows yellow. The menu layouts are similar to COD 4, but the fonts maintain their sans serif modernness, while the aesthetic harkens back to the first handful of games in the series. Wraparound is still present too, thankfully. Response time between navigation is as instant as the ones before it, which feels so snappy and satisfying. When we get to setting up a multiplayer match, the match options are a little all over the place since there's so many, but the way it's quartered off helps with organization. In-game menus are pretty identical to COD 4, with class selection and everything. Simple, informative, and clean. Overall, I still love the aesthetic and responsiveness. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 was developed by Infinity Ward and released on November 10, 2009 for Xbox 360, PS3, and PC. Stepping forward back into the modern age of warfare, it's largely the same gameplay-wise to COD 4, with a little more polish and refinement. The start screen boasts simplicity with more graphic design than photography, but the smoke still blows across. Once we enter the main menu, we're greeted with a brand new layout design. Since the game has 3 main game modes or game types, they are laid out front and center for interaction. I'm unsure if this is a first time thing, but the first option highlighted for me is the campaign in the middle. The menu is very aesthetically pleasing, not too much text on screen, but just enough to relay all the necessary information. The main 3 options do not wrap around, which is a slight bummer, but navigating through 3 isn't a burden, so totally excusable. Still, it maintains that snappy, instant selection like previous games too. In-game is pretty much also identical to its predecessor. In summary, I really think this is a spiffy, speedy system, and I hope it's not just the nostalgia speaking. Call of Duty Black Ops was the Treyarch developed Cold War era entry released on November 9, 2010 for PC, PlayStation 3, Wii, and Xbox 360. The title screen maintains the same style as before with a static image and billowing smoke, but once we enter the main menu, we get a whole new look and level of interactivity for the game. To the routine player, the menu operates the same as any other, using the D-pad to navigate and it indeed wraps around. But as you stay on the menu, the voice of an interrogator questions you. Me? The player? Whatever, let's just look at the options. The backgrounds of the sub-menus are really slick and add a nice flair and texture to them, and still maintaining that instant feedback of navigation. Onto the game modes. These menus are definitely more like the previous Modern Warfare entries, both the color scheme as well as navigation and layout. Not much to harp on since it's mostly the same, but when setting up a game, you can see that this is the first time we have an animated character model during Create a Class. The gear and look of your character changes based on which class/perks you use, which is a nice touch. This seems to be the inception of the visualization of your character in the game, which we will track as we move forward. Now let's get back to that main menu, shall we? I'm sure we all know this, but the main menu screen is not just a menu, there's some hidden elements to it. If you move the left stick, you can actually look around, meaning you're playing as a character even at the main menu screen. Tapping the triggers allows you to break free from your restraints and actually walk around the room. It's a really fun, clever addition that crafts a memorable experience for players. It's optional, it's not in your face, and you can easily press a single button to return to the default state of the menu. But it's unique, and I appreciate the way they took everything that still worked for the menu structure and navigation, but added a new fun element to the experience. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 is the next installment, releasing on November 8, 2011 for Xbox 360, PS3, and PC. Infinity Ward led the charge with some help from Sledgehammer Games and even Raven Software, 2 studios that become staple of the franchise's development later on. It was the final installment of the original Modern Warfare series and introduced point streaks instead of kill streaks for the first time. Once again, the start menu sticks with a tradition of a static image background with a reliable animated smoke. Instantaneously responsive navigation remains, with the same Modern Warfare menu aesthetic. We got the same trio of main game mode options like Modern Warfare 2. It's classy, simple, and gets the job done. Wraparound still is clinging on, thankfully too. Not much to say, it's quite close to a clone of Modern Warfare 2 but with some color tweaks, so it's a solid setup going that they didn't need to change too much for. Call of Duty Black Ops 2 released on November 18th, 2012 for Xbox 360, PS3, and PC, and even Wii U. Developed by Treyarch, it's the second installment in the Black Ops saga and spans between the 1980s and 2025, at this point the first far future game. The start menu is familiar, with a static image and smoke like usual, but this is where we start to completely deviate. Side note, I purchased 2 different used copies of Black Ops 2, and neither worked. I barely got this footage once, so the footage won't be as extensive as the rest of the game, so I apologize. After it froze, I relaunched it, the game just bricked on the logo screens, both of them. This entry in the series is cursed for me or something. Once we were past the start screen, an animated and complex control room type background moves constantly in the background. Similar to Black Ops 1, it appears to be from the first person perspective because the menu stems from a projection on a character's arm, but there's no interactivity beyond this point of view. The menu sadly does not wrap around, despite being in a vertical text format. It's quite a deviation and seems like a strange omission for such a simple menu. Response time is almost instant, but with slight animations of the brackets around your selection, it seems a touch delayed, but I could be wrong. The options menu is laid out pretty simply like before, and the response time here seems a hair, if at all, faster than the main menu screen. Create a class actually omits the animated character model, which is interesting to leave out after Black Ops 1, but the layout is more spread out and horizontal. It works though, as everything is organized and simple. The verticality of the layout is logical and good though, so I have to give credit where it's due. Now we get to the era of the odd ones. Call of Duty Ghosts released on November 5th, 2013 for PS3, Xbox 360, PC, and even Wii U, and in the following weeks was a launch title for PS4 and Xbox One. Developed by Infinity Ward, it was met with mixed feelings and hasn't been remembered as favorable as the others. The start screen is super simple, not even a background graphic, just the logo and some classic animated smoke to get the job done. Entering the game from here, a slight sense of relief washes over because the menu format is a lot simpler and faster. Yes, we still have some extra animations for selection, navigation, but I don't think the animations delay your input. There's loading screens between the main game mode options from the beginning, but that's nothing new here. Interestingly enough, like in Black Ops 1, the animated character is back. I believe this is important because there's a key reason for why this choice becomes commonplace in every entry in the series. Weapon and equipment menus are still well laid out and have logical flow, but do return to a more vertical layout compared to Black Ops 2. Overall, it's a non-offensive evolution of the Modern Warfare 3 and Black Ops 1 style menus, and I appreciate Infinity Ward going back to what works instead of trying something super flashy and new like Black Ops 2. Call of Duty Advanced Warfare released on November 4th, 2014 for PS4, PS3, Xbox One, Xbox 360, and PC, making it the second cross-generation game for these consoles. It was the first game in the series primarily developed by Sledgehammer Games instead of the usual switcheroo between the two titans. Start screen wise, it's mostly simple, a slightly animated 3D model with, as you guessed it, animated smoke. Going to the main menu though, we completely deviate from the simplicity of before. Here we cycle through a sort of 3D model showcase, switching between different scenes and characters rotating around. The menu structure itself is still laid out pretty well. It's vertical, still hangs onto that wraparound thankfully. Animations of the selections are minimal. Response time is instant. Options are still good and simple too. Create a class is starting to get a little cluttered, but at least everything is slightly organized into boxes. It's modern, futuristic, but it isn't overly flashy or animated like Black Ops 2. We start to really dive headfirst into character customization here, a no turning back moment for the series. Everything from your character's head to clothes they wear are customizable and unlockable. For the most part though, this game isn't egregious or insulting. It works, it looks fine, and it's functional. Next we have the Treyarch developed Call of Duty Black Ops 3. Released on November 6, 2015 for PS4, Xbox One, PC, and a feature-restricted version on the older consoles, it was Activision's first partnership with Sony over its previous Microsoft deals, earning PlayStation timed exclusive DLC. At a fresh boot up, we're greeted with an animated soldier in front of a blazing outline of the numerals. In its own way, it's simplistic, since there's no text other than the tiny start prompt in the corner, but it also is more complex because of the animated character model on the start screen. Despite the futuristic flair, the response time and layout feels slightly better compared to Black Ops 2. The main menu has a decent, simple, vertical layout with wraparound. Once again, character customization is at the forefront, and the menu structure for these screens is quite similar to Advanced Warfare, boxy and techy. Create a class isn't overly flashy either. Overall layout is decent but lacks tact and minimalism. Call of Duty Infinite Warfare, not to be confused with Advanced Warfare, released for the strictly modern consoles at the time on November 4th, 2016, and developed by Infinity Ward. Space and zero gravity were heavily featured in this entry, along with a grappling hook. The start screen is back to simple but not without subtle flair. An animated techie interface background shifts in the background, but nothing too distracting, just enough movement to spice things up. I appreciate that it also continues into the main menu where the text layout still harkens back to the simple, left-aligned, wrap-around, snappy structure and navigation. Everything is quick, no excessive animations or backgrounds, it just works. We do see here the infamous "update requires restart" pop-up that seems to be born in this entry and still remains in every game to this day. Once we enter the multiplayer menu, however, our nice and simple aesthetic dissolves into character-forward animated model backgrounds. They gotta make sure you see your character because when you're actually playing the game in first person, you'll never see your soldier. And then why would you spend your hard-earned cash on the skins they shovel to you? Create a Class is actually quite similar to Black Ops 3, but with some added fluid, longer animations between selections. It's a little cluttered, but not overly unorganized. It still has the boxy separation like the previous futuristic games in the series. Zombies isn't too much different, just slightly different style, but overall the same philosophy and layout. Not too shabby, but there seems to be less to love about these menus as the series goes on. Taking it back to the past, Call of Duty World War II is the Sledgehammer-developed entry released on November 3rd, 2017 for PS4, Xbox One, and PC. An aesthetically pleasing start screen greets us with the vintage film filter and some cycling footage alpha masked into the game's titles. It's actually quite a nice way to add some movement but maintain the minimalism of the design. I don't mind it. The main menu deviates from this simplicity and blasts an onslaught of full-on video footage, but the menu navigation is nice and snappy. I don't mind the footage because it's attention-grabbing and its modern design is still pleasing. Sub-menus for map selection and create a class are actually very well organized and simple. Its layout is logical and unobtrusive. And even though the character customization is still very prominent, it's a respectful design philosophy. Sure, it still has the boxy layout like the futuristic games, but it isn't adding extra flair or visual noise just to pump up the production value. The lobby screens are an omen of what's to come though, showing an animated scene with your character and all the others in the lobby, so you can see what skins and unlocks everybody else got. Overall, I'm satisfied and surprised by the elegance of most of the menus in this installment, so bravo to Sledgehammer here. We gotta go back to the Black Ops future. Call of Duty Black Ops 4 was developed by Treyarch and released on October 12, 2018 for PS4, Xbox One, and PC. This one was extremely divisive because it was the first game in the series to not have a campaign mode. It also introduced the ever-growing Battle Royale mode to the franchise, although Warzone replaced it eventually. Just as we return to the future time setting, we return to animated 3D models strewn across the background, even on the start menu. Once entering the game, we see the main menu. To be honest, it is quite disappointing and cluttered. Flashy and complex images that the developer can update when new content drops scatter the screen and are glued to your selections. I understand the developers want to inform players of the new updates and content, but it's a little too mobile app-ish for me. There's no obvious or logical flow to the structure, and wraparound is completely absent. Instead of neatly nested menu structures, everything is all out on the page at once. And despite being organized in boxes and aligned correctly, it's still messy and not very pretty to look at. The menu is overall mostly snappy and quick while using the D-pad, but the transition animations between options feel ever so slightly delayed. If the visual disarray wasn't bad enough, this menu is also a cursor-based one even on console, meaning you can use the analog sticks to navigate as well. It's a tragic trend in modern console games to adopt this clunky system. Cursor menus on console are just unfun and slow. List-based menus work fine on PC, so why inherently design it mainly for a single platform? In the game lobbies, we are continuing this trend of character-first mentality with animated soldiers and customization at the forefront. Create a class is fine, the option menus are normal, but class selection and pause menus are a little cluttered and don't have good flow since it looks more like a phone app than a console game menu structure. The focus in a lot of these menus is on additional downloadable or purchasable content. It's quite annoying, and it's almost as if they care more about presenting additional purchases to you than the one you already made, or showing you what you unlocked or can buy rather than guiding you to actually playing the game. This is a massive step down in menu design, and sad to say it, there's no going back, folks. Infinity Ward is back and rebooting the Modern Warfare franchise they created. Call of Duty Modern Warfare released on October 25th, 2019 for PS4, Xbox One, and PC. It's a new take on non-futuristic war, and the idea to cash in on a beloved namesake seemed to work out in their favor. Now, critiquing the menu here is going to be a bit trickier than the rest, and that's because the current state of these menus is astronomically different from when the game actually first launched. In order to have a tiny peek at the old menu screen from when it launched, here's some help from Ray Narvaez Jr. in his capture of the campaign playthrough. We can see that it's sort of like an evolved version of the original Modern Warfare style menu. The 3 gameplay pillars now fill the screen, and the highlighted ones play footage from that game mode. The animation between options is actually nice and quick. For a more busy and flashy screen, it's actually still quite minimalist and pleasant. Even the sub-menus feel quite modern and clean with slight animations for flair. The organization for the most part has decent flow, the option menus are expansive and long, but it still has a logical order and ease of navigation. Now let's compare the way it launched to where it's at in 2023. The start screen is fine, a subtly animated but clean background image with the start prompt, but once we enter, however, it's quite insulting what we see. An egregious advertisement for Modern Warfare 2, the latest game in the series, greets us. It's not enough that you bought or are playing a slightly older game in the series. They have to take up more of your time and mind space to advertise the newest game. I'd take a wild guess and say whoever enjoys COD enough to buy the game surely knows what the newest one is and that it's already out, and might already even have it. I cannot believe that the first thing that shows up when you boot an older game is a link to a store page to buy another game. It's not an option to jump into the campaign or multiplayer either. It's a literal full-screen advertisement for an entirely different game. There's no longer the 3 gameplay pillars, just 2 columns, and one of them is the ad, the other one collecting all those gameplay options from before. It has the same animations as the launch version, options are at the bottom, and wraparound is still present, thankfully. Once we enter one of the game mode menus, this is where the new era of Call of Duty begins. A massively animated scene of your character endlessly walking is front and center, making sure you're able to see the skins you spent your hard-earned money on, since you won't be able to see them when you're actually playing the game, except maybe in assassination moves. The main game mode options wrap around, which is nice. The create a class menus aren't too terrible, although the attachments menu is a little disorganized. There's no flow, it's like a schematic graph of randomly strewn around options that have no sense of flow or movement. Everything within these menus and submenus is all animated to weave in between everything you're changing, moving between all the objects in the arsenal of this room. It's well done and looks good, but it's also kind of distracting and disorienting, quickly snapping to new objects in an instant as you select them. Everything in this game is about customization. Finally, there's an entire massive store tab dedicated to purchasing these customization items, reminiscent of anything but Call of Duty. The flow is fine, it wraps around, but if you remove the logos of what game this was from, I wouldn't have guessed Call of Duty any day of the week. Overall, I appreciate some of the modern flair of the menu designs. It's clean and has a good aesthetic, but this was the beginning of the end for pleasing and effective menu philosophy. Next up is Treyarch's Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War. It was released on November 13th, 2020 for PS4, Xbox One, and PC, and shortly after came to the new generation of consoles. As with Modern Warfare 2019, Cold War has a different styled menu at launch than it does now. The start screen is a video montage, which is fine. It's interesting, flashy, I don't mind it. Getting to the main menu, it is utilizing the same pillar format, and it has more options than the previous game since Zombies and Warzone were both included here. And of course, they need an entire column just for the store so you can buy things. There's no video footage playing in the pillars, just a slightly zooming in image, so it's a little more subtle. Once we enter one of the menus, it's quite similar to the structure of the previous as well. Tabs on top, slightly animated transitions, etc. I actually do appreciate the animations in this one, it's creative, mimicking the confidential file style and redacted blackout text. Not much else to say here, it's just a style swap of the previous entry's menu. Moving on to what it looks like in 2023, to no surprise, it's quite literally a carbon copy of what Modern Warfare 2019's looks like as well today. Not only is the first thing you see an ad for Modern Warfare 2, but they went the extra mile to make sure you knew exactly what they were talking about and added a glowing banner at the top, reiterating the same message. Options are mostly similar, just styled differently. On the right side of the menu, it's the same as Modern Warfare again, giving you the 3 main game mode options. Inside of those, carbon copy from before. Everything is familiar and decently laid out. Create a class is a little more traditional though, bringing back the more organized vertical layout to attachments, which I appreciate. They still have the gun model and the Black Void vibe going, but at least the interface is a little neater. The store tab is also pretty much identical, not much more to say about that. Overall, the only improvements to me are the aesthetic and the new create a class menu style. Otherwise, still kind of an eyesore, sadly. Sledgehammer Games' Call of Duty Vanguard is up next, releasing for PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox Series X and S, and PC on November 5th, 2021. The start screen is reminiscent of the older games, a simple logo splash screen with some animated sparks and smoke. Classy and clean, I dig it. But this is pretty much where the praise ends for me. Yes, like the recent entries, it has a different layout now than when it launched, but the one it came out of the gates with was not much better, maybe even worse. It's got the same pillar structure, but 75% of the main menu is entirely dedicated to advertising other games than the one you just purchased. Not only is it just advertising the previous game, which is already insane, but even the one before that. It shows both Black Ops Cold War and Modern Warfare 2019. If you bought it for PS5 or Xbox Series X, you paid $70 at launch. And what does Activision say to you first thing when you boot it up? Oh, here's some other games in the series, want to buy those too? Anyway, the pillars have animated zoomed images and the animations are clean like before. Not much is changing between these games anymore, which sucks. Again, there's mainly just a palette style swap for the menu structure and layout. For some reason, they bring back the strewn about create a class layout from Modern Warfare, but otherwise it's the same. Same jumpy movements to each object in the customization menus. It seems they are moving COD from a series with new and different games each year to a platform that continues on with just new updates, despite still charging full price every year. Why make players pay for a new game when you just advertise the new ones first thing, have microtransactions, and update the old games to make sure everybody knows what else you can buy anyway? Either way, Vanguard's menus are unimpressive and a slight step back even from the previous. Here we stand, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 2022 for PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox Series S and X, and PC. Released on October 28, 2022, it is a sequel to the reboot of the Modern Warfare storyline, and as of the making of this video, the latest entry in the series. Since this game is only a handful of months old, the menus haven't changed too much since launch quite yet. Interestingly enough, the title screen, as of recording this now, simply says Call of Duty, almost embracing that idea of COD as a platform instead of a series. The style is close to 2019's Modern Warfare, just green, but the layout and navigation is vastly different than anything we've ever seen so far. With no exaggeration, this may be one of the worst video game menus I've ever seen in my entire life. There is no main menu. It just boots you to a featured multiplayer playlist first thing. No organization by game mode or game type, no sub-menu categories, it's just everything thrown on the entire screen at once, maybe even worse than Black Ops 4. In order to get to the campaign, you have to scroll down 2 rows and then select the option you want. As many have said, it's quite literally a streaming service style menu. Ugly cookie cutter icons and boxes for things with no logical flow or design to them. I don't mind the animated graphics for each option though, and how they transition on screen. It's quick, clean, and it's not intrusive. Of course, there's always an entire row dedicated to the other Call of Duty games you can purchase. Wraparound is entirely absent here, so you have to go through the entire maze of options and find exactly what you want by hand. There's so much text and clutter on screen at all times, tons of redundant information that could be cleaned up and organized, but instead we're stuck with Call of Duty Hulu Warfare. Create a Class is confusing and readopts the disorganized Modern Warfare 2019 layout. They utilize stacked UI elements for weapons that just don't make it easy or intuitive to navigate. Modern Warfare 2019 had a much more modern and professional look and feel to it. I would much prefer them just take that exact design and turn it green. We're still whip panning to each new piece of equipment, which is no surprise. I wish the equipment would come to the screen like in the older games, not the screen going to the equipment. The operator screen is actually an improvement over the past few, since it's a grid and not a single row of options. The Battle Pass menu is atrocious though, with this map-like style of unlocking sections, but the navigation through it is just sloppy. The store tab is pretty much the same, but I think selections are larger and fewer per row. The lobby screen is also disorganized and chaotic, not giving good feedback to the player for where to go and what to do to set up a game or matchmake into one. The options menu is also pure misery. It looks like a mobile app and navigation through it is unnecessarily laborious. Even better, it carries over into the game to make sure you can't get to what you need quickly mid-game. I will give it credit though, it wraps around, but it's still a slog to move through. Inside the game options sub-menus though, the options are strangely sectioned off and don't bleed into each other. So you have to navigate to the left every time you want to go to the next category, select the category, and then navigate right again for every single page you want to visit. It has no reason to be this way and puts more obstacles in between the player and what they're looking for. Overall, this is definitely the worst menu out of the series and does almost nothing right design-wise. It looks awful, it navigates painfully, and it doesn't make it a fun experience. Good thing it's the fastest selling Call of Duty of all time though, and they won't do anything to improve it since people still buy the game regardless of how poorly they treat the franchise. Wow, quite the journey we've been on. Witnessing the change of UI design and menu structure throughout the decades is quite fascinating. With the advent of new technologies like smartphones and tablets, you can tell it clearly had an influence on certain design choices, along with the degradation and microtransaction monetization of the gaming industry. Many things have changed over the years, and I thought it would be interesting to compare and track the progress for one of the top 5 best-selling video game franchises of all time. Let me know your thoughts on how things have evolved over the years, maybe even shout out your favorite video game menu. But I appreciate your time and viewership, and I hope this video finds you well.